Welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good afternoon, Ray.
Hello, Keith. I'm good today. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm
All
doing
right.
good.
Hot, a little bit hot.
Pretty warm right now. That's for
Uh,
sure. That is for sure. But let's just get right into our
yeah.
right into our program today. Why don't you introduce our guest for us?
I am very happy to do that. I'm glad that I met Greg Crosby when he came to Oak Ridge on a tour. I was able to spend some time with him. As you know, just from the past week, I get some very unusual folks coming through Oak Ridge. We've had a photographer from Australia. We've had a video cast person from Atlanta who has over 100,000 followers.
Is that right?
My goodness, I want to get Oak Ridge on that. So,
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
any rate, Greg has an international reputation too as a mental health therapist, and he's actually even done some work in China that he told me a little about. But I'll let him tell you a little more about his background because, other than me meeting him in Oak Ridge and being intrigued by his work in social media and the effect that it's having on Keith, believe it or not, your and my mind.
Yeah.
Not just teenagers. Teenagers are
Right.
getting the brunt of it, but us old folks are being sucked into addiction to social media, addiction to the iPhone.
Mhm.
I remember, and Greg, I'm going to give it to you quickly, but I remember Greg saying to me, "What do you do when you get up first in the morning? Do you go to the bathroom first, or do you look at your phone?"
Yeah.
I didn't answer it. Okay, Greg, I've gone so far that you're going to have to pull it back and give the folks a little bit more introduction about yourself, please.
Well, I will be glad to. Thank you, Ray, for the invitation of being here and presenting. And I think I'm presenting mainly because the Oppenheimer movie came out,
Right,
and Emily Strasser's book Half-Life of a Secret came out,
right.
and it was really focused on people that were both these things. People that were focused on dealing with history in their family life story that was difficult to talk about.
And
And it gave,
you're going to talk about your father, Gilmore uh,
yes.
Crosby, and his association to Oak Ridge. So you can fit right into that situation of family members. So we're looking forward to having you talk about him too.
Well, thank you. And I think I'll start the presentation here. So I'll press share.
Okay. All right. We have your presentation up now, so you're fine.
So we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to just outline some of the resources I'm using in this presentation. And I'll be going over a basic way to look at change through Joseph Campbell and tie that in with my family history from my father's work all the way up to present time. And I'll be using family photos, parent letters, and then family members. And certain family members really were very helpful for me, like Sherry, my cousin, Tom, my cousin, Dave, of course, my 95-year-old uncle, who is the younger brother of my father, and my sister. So I want to thank all of them and all the support they gave me. And I'll be going over photos, documents. We're lacing this together. It will be an integrative approach with Emily Trum's art on change and the technology gap theory that I formulated. And I want to specifically thank Ray Smith for his excellent tours and time with me when I was in Oak Ridge in April. and Mike Stalla, who is the local history specialist at Oak Ridge, for spending time and gathering information for me. And then I want to also just mention, this is an important book, Half-Life of a Secret: Reckoning with a Hidden History, and it really spoke to me. So thank you, Emily Strasser, for writing it. So this is like a 3-act play that I'll be doing with an epilogue. And it will be based on departing on a journey, descending into this experience of Oak Ridge, moving beyond Oak Ridge, getting established in the outside world, and then returning home with your new learnings. And this comes from this idea that when we go through change in every culture, through stories, we go through 3 phases. And that's what Joseph Campbell found in 240 stories around the world: departure, descent, resilience, return. And then the epilogue will be what Ray was discussing on the technological gap theory. It's basically how an invention affects our body, our thoughts, our values, and our feelings, and what we can do about it. And so that is a way to tie this whole framework together, because Manhattan Project is about technology. And moving right into Ray's comment, so is the cell phone or the smartphone. And so is AI. So I'm going to end the presentation with a framework and a model. A bit of my family background. My father, and this is the reason, as Ray stated, I'm doing this, is from Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. He and my mother moved there right after they were married. So this is their first home in Wilkinsburg during the Manhattan Project. And I think it's important to note the church affiliation. Dad was a United Brethren, so it was more of a peace-oriented framework for him. And when he joined the Manhattan Project, whatever the product was, he reported to me that he wanted it to be used as a deterrent. That would be a very strong value preference. And my mother was in the same camp. Gil Crosby and Dorothy Robertson met when attending college in Virginia. So they had experience being in the South. So when he was asked later to go from Ohio to the South, he had a background of that. And that is actually where they met. And they transferred from attending college in Virginia to Otterbein College, which is now a university, in the fall of 1941. So when we depart on this journey, we're leaving what is familiar. We're noting our losses. We're focusing on what we know and don't know about where we're going. And it is a call to adventure in many different ways. And we just have to stay connected to each other when we have this call. So here they are, my dad and mom at Otterbein, in 1943, 2 months before there is a significant call to adventure. And so they are coupled. They are very happy. She is an education major. He is a chemistry major. The chemistry professors were alerted to be on the lookout through the Manhattan Project for bright students that would be able to adapt to high levels of stress and utilize their chemistry. Dad was recruited from his chemistry professor for this project. He was interviewed, and he received in May of 1943, this letter. This is from Eastman Kodak. That is an offer letter to work in the Manhattan Project. And it's very detailed, I'm told, and it is now in the Oak Ridge Public Library, and Mike Stallo has a copy of it. And what I'm going to do is go through just some key points to this call of adventure, because it's a really interesting time document from Eastman Kodak that recruited my dad. So here's the key offer letters in this, key offer points. The nature of the product and the type of work cannot be disclosed because of its importance to the war effort. Direct quote. There will be plenty of opportunity to utilize your training and experience in chemistry. And then you will go, and this is directly from the letter, you will go to a site in Tennessee near Knoxville or another site for training, and your wage will be $49.40 a week with overtime. So what this did is it created a call to adventure. He decided, well, I think I'm going to do this. He is very aware, because he's a chemistry major, of the competition between German scientists and American scientists. He wants to help with the war effort here. And so he decides to leave. He graduates in June. He starts right away in June 1943 and moving into the Manhattan Project, going into Oak Ridge, getting trained. And as he was doing this, the town, the area with the farmland was going through their own changes. And this is what Oak Ridge looked like. This is a picture from public domain. And there were hundreds of families living here, 400 families. And this is a letter from the War Department to those families on November 11, 1942. The War Department intends to take possession of your farm on December 1, 1942. It will be necessary for you to move out on that date. So that's less than a month from when they received that letter. Families were reimbursed for their house and land. Like, for example, one family was offered $3,600 for the house and 80 acres. There was tremendous interest in trying to get this war effort going. People knew that we needed to do something, but it was very disruptive for many individuals, because you had to move, and in many of these farms, it was subsistent farming. So this supported their own family. That was their main business. So in this departing on the journey, we have Oak Ridge being transformed, the farmland being transformed into this, what will become 3 years later, a 75,000 member town called Oak Ridge. And Dad moving to his first main chemistry job in the Manhattan Project. So this sets up the second stage. Once we depart on the journey, we descend and we get immersed in the details of where we are, and we have to deal with how we deal with our tests and trials, the things that come up in life. And we need to locate our strengths and experience our rewards to work through this process. So we are going to go right into a favorite Danish philosopher of my father, who basically said life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Søren Kierkegaard. So as a result, this is what Dad faced when he entered in early June 1943, a fenced, gated community. And once you enter, you realize this is not Kansas anymore. This is not Ohio anymore. And with it, he needed a badge. And with it, of course, he always had to have security clearance and keep his badge on at all times. And he was single then, so he lived in the dorms. And overlooking many of the places he would go would be signs. This is a typical sign. The enemy is looking. You see the Nazi Germany and the iris, the Nazi symbol in the iris is looking for information, guard against your talk. So I know a lot about this prior to Ray because my dad was open enough to talk to me about it. And he died at age 46. I was 18, but I had about 4 years of conversation with him where he talked to me about how he felt, what he did in the Manhattan Project. I was a very curious kid, and he did it in a way that would not overwhelm me. It was joining to me. And he did that with other family members in an appropriate way. So what happened here is that Oak Ridge was about 1,200 people, the mainly construction people in February of 43. He comes in June. The Y12 building, which he is going to be working in for 4 years, wasn't even completed, but he was there working as a chemist with the construction workers and talking about how to make this building safe. Because they were aware that the one word they could not say is what they were doing, and that was uranium. And you could not say that word or you would be evicted. And he knew that uranium has a lot of potentiality in it for positive and negative, and it could be quite explosive. But he did not know originally what the project was until he figured it out probably about a month into the project. No one ever told him what the project was, even though at one point he was supervising 250 people, or he was a foreman for 250 people. But he had figured it out. And then you had this tremendous 30 to 40 homes, prefabricated homes a day being built. The dorms were for single adults, which he was in for a year, and then homes for married couples. And then there was segregated housing, which was difficult for him and his own values. And he, like with many other people, wanted that changed, but was not able to get that changed. He was also concerned that married couples were not allowed to, who were African American at that time, being called Black, were not allowed to house together. They had to be separate. So there was this interesting tension developing in him about the values of trying to work with our government and the importance of fairness. So what we have, such as with the segregated communities we had in Oak Ridge. So then this is the married family homes. And my father would eventually move into that, and we visited his actual address, which I'll show you in a minute, when we were there in April. And then this is a segregated communities. So there were some stark differences here. And so you had the tension of living in an area with heavily being changed. So there wasn't even a bus system, and now it became a major bus hub, transporting people to and from buildings. This is the Y-12 being built, and this is in 1943, and then it was completed. And this is the Y-12 in 44, and at the end of 1943 as well. And so he spent his time there, and he quickly got promoted into a foreman role, supervising about 250 people. And so the situation was this: he was concerned about the safety of this, and everyone in the project, because we're building something that has never been built before at this size. This is what it used to be in a very small size at the University of California in Berkeley in their laboratory. It is now a major building with all these calutrons and electromagnetic plant to differentiate 238 uranium from 235. And through the letters I was given from my father to my mother, he was very careful not to say anything that was too that would create censorship. But he did say he's spending a lot of time on testing and safety. And this is interesting because his father was a lead maintenance person for the Monongahela Railroad, checking for safety. So here this gets generated back into the generation again with his first major job. And here's a famous picture of the Calutron girls that are operators they were called girls then, we would call them women now, but they are, they are monitoring the differentiation between 238 and 235. And the 235 is what made the bomb potent. Now, at this time, the majority of people are not aware they're doing a bomb. Dad kept a secret even from his wife. I think she told me she really thought that's what they were doing, but no one talked about it. And this is their double marriage. So they're a year into Oak Ridge. They're dealing with the tensions of and the stress of dealing with very substantive, perhaps dangerous material, if not safe, into a rapid growing community that had long lines. But there was this mission to help with the war effort, thinking it would be aimed at Germany all this time.
Where did they get married?
They got married in Caledonia, Ohio, close to Otterbein at my mother's church, which was the United Methodist, and it's a double wedding with her sister and her husband, who became a Methodist minister, Howard.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. And so they went on a short honeymoon in Lakeside, Ohio, and then came back to their home. And this address still exists, and they were very happy. And here they are in the married housing unit. And the first thing that Dad wanted in this music housing unit is music. So he got a record player, he got a piano. He knew he could calm down and de-stress with this. And this is part of his version of a sacred grove. It's a place where you can go to calm yourself, to find respite in the world. and it helps you prepare to go out into more dangerous situations. So as a 23-year-old, and he was there from age 23 to 27, this was quite a challenge. This was his first job. And a lot of the letters between these two, my mom and dad, were related to if my mother would work. And as my mother was a graduate in education from Otterbein University, and she wanted to teach. He wanted her to teach. But as he started to age into this position of about a year into it, he and she both thought she needed to keep her attention on him because there was a lot of stress going on. And this was reported in the first mental health clinic in Oak Ridge of managers dealing with the stress of the situation. Dad, to my knowledge, did not utilize that, but they decided that she would not work. And that was also part of the time of the being the 50s housewife, or the 40s, 50s housewife as well. She later worked after she died. He died in 1967 as a learning disability specialist. So here is a piano. And whenever we're dealing with adverse situations, even if they would be exciting and we're developing something, we need ways to calm down to manage our stress. Now, this is particularly interesting because of the limited space. This piano is in their bedroom.
Okay.
So there's a lot of serenading going on here. And it's his side of the family is quite musical. And another access is nature. When we're dealing with our own internal stress, we need to go, nature helps. That's what it actually helps integrate the right and left hemisphere. And because we can see a more of a big picture there. And this is his younger brother. Now, the younger brother, Bob, is still alive. He's turning 96 on Monday. He's an active writer. He has written several journal articles in the field of organization development in the last several years. He started his own graduate school in organization development. These two brothers really, in my belief, fed off each other. Dad really learned a lot about management and technical skills. Robert took off on this after Dad died to develop his own graduate school in organization development called LEIS, the Leadership Institute of Seattle. And he is a singer. He's the oldest person to make the West Coast Professional Opera Company at age 87. So numerous family members would join Dad and Mom and his side and my mother's side because they knew they needed support. And it wasn't that the Oak Ridge wasn't supportive, but everyone was realizing this is not Ohio. Something is happening down here, but everyone kind of kept it quiet, and Dad never let on what was going on.
Okay, don't go back to that, please. I want to make a point. Keith, you'll recognize the Kodak camera hanging around his neck. It wasn't unusual, and notice these pictures. It wasn't unusual for people to have cameras and make pictures in Oak Ridge. Although Ed Westcott was the only one that could get to the technical areas, families had their own cameras. Okay, you can go ahead now, Greg.
Yes, and these are the personal pictures,
yes,
many of them, except for the organizational ones, which were probably Ed Westcott did.
Yeah.
And my family Dad, as a chemist, developed pictures.
Okay.
And so he is with my mom on their boardwalk as they walk into the house, and his mother.
Oh, so that was a flat top house they were in.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is their favorite soda place that they would go.
Mine too.
Now, yours too. And I went there as a result of Ray tipping me off about this. And thank you, Ray. And it was a fun journey. Everyone was so talkative. It was like I do group therapy. It was like being in a group therapy session. And
I've
I
never thought
thoroughly
of
enjoyed
it. Yeah, I've never thought of the soda fountain as a group therapy session. No, that's neat.
it.
Hmm.
So, with this going on, uh, and then moving into August 1945, everyone was aware that something was happening, but particularly when Roosevelt died. Dad reported to me years later in the early 60s how he was concerned how that this might get used. He was aware that there was a decision to either have as a deterrent or a use. And when Nazi Germany and Hitler died and Nazi Germany surrendered, and then it moved apparently with plans to with Harry Truman as president to use this in Hiroshima and then use a plutonium bomb in Nagasaki. So when this happened, this was a very difficult moment for my father. And and like many other people that were there, he was proud of what he did. He thought value-wise, he needed to be there, but he did not want it to be utilized this way. And this is a war certificate that he got, that he participated in the Manhattan District in the work essential to the production of the atomic bomb, thereby contributing to successful conclusion of World War II. So what I think was interesting about this that I learned from Ray and also Mike Stallo was that the first question that Ray asked me when I talked about guilt was he asked me, did my father move to addiction? And he did not. He moved to service. And he moved to make science and faith work together. And he moved to focus on arms control. And he was against the hydrogen bomb, but he was very focused on how he could convert his energy from the shame he might have felt or the guilt to service. So a lot of his career was focused on service and I'll go over some of the things he did at RCA from 47 to his death in 67. And this is the Lancaster plant they moved to because many people out of Oak Ridge who were chemists got employed right away because it was so unusual work. And he said, in that 5-year period, 20 years of experience, because he knew we needed to work technically together. But if we didn't work as a team, there's danger that could happen. We have to be united. We have to be open about conflicts we're seeing at work, anything unsafe. We have to focus on what's strong and strength in the workforce. And that he brought with him into RCA. And this is the early tube division in black and white tubes. And he would move into color TV. But before that happened, here I am. I'm a 2-year-old
Okay.
in Lancaster with my dad and mom, and it was uh, really a wonderful place for me to grow up. And this became a major piece in our life. There was RCA, and then there was the church. Now, the interesting thing as a 5-year-old, because of all the McCarthy hearings, there was concern about whether a scientist or a chemist like my father could be a Christian. And we actually had, with me up on stage as a 5-year-old, a little panel discussion with the church of can a scientist be a Christian?
Hmm. Well,
Fascinating.
yes.
And so someone asked me, they asked my parents if they could ask me a question. Now I am 5.
Okay.
And they asked me a question if I thought my parents were Christian. And I said, I get a lot of Christmas presents. And I think as my father was digesting this over the years, he thought that was the perfect thing to say because it just dislodged this tension. And then we had 7 chemists in Lancaster join the church after we did. We were the first.
How about that?
So as then our family changed, and this is my sister Gail in 1954. And my dad's career is starting to take off, and I will explain what happened here. And he credits a lot of this experience of team building to what he ended up needing to do right in Oak Ridge.
Hmm.
And so he gets a major citation in 1955 for his work. So he is about 35 years old at this time. And this citation goes into very elaborate things that he was doing to be noted. And it basically said that Gil Crosby cited for excellence in administration, balancing challenging technical skills with teamwork and developing new products. So he was involved, his team, he was the manager of the first red and color TV. That was a big deal. No one knew how to do that. This team, because of bringing together, talking about their problems, being open with each other as a team, worked on this. And then it was for helping to facilitate phosphors in Princeton Lab, Marion, Indiana, and Lancaster in an admirable fashion, blending their work group into an efficient organization. When he started talking to me, really between the ages of 12 and 18 for me, because I was curious. I think if I wasn't curious, he wasn't going to reveal it. I was a curious kid. And I think he saw a possible, I'm sure he saw a possible therapist in this little 12-year-old. But I wasn't doing therapy with my dad. I was just listening to his story.
Yeah.
And that's what he did with other people as well. Because if we stop telling our stories, it becomes very radioactive, as Emily Strasser says in her book, Half-Life of a Secret. Stories about the difficulties and the positive aspects about our life are important to be passed on. And so this is the famous Peacock. RCA owned NBC at this time and color TV, and we were very proud of that. With all these accomplishments, though, and his work in luminescence, the sadness, the guilt that he experienced about the bomb being dropped was not forgotten on him. So it wasn't that he was moody and depressed, but he sometimes would reminisce and say, this is hard for me. And he would talk to his friends. He talked to his supervisor, who I ended up talking to 18 years after he died when he gave a speech about this. And I think that was a healthy approach to dealing with being conflicted. And I realized that not everyone in that project felt that way. But he did, and other people did. And that's kind of why I held on to it all these years and not went public. I went private with the stories until Emily Strasser's book and Oppenheimer came out. So my cousin Tom is a PhD emeritus in math, and he had this picture, and he was 2 years older than me, and Dad would talk to Tom about in the 60s about his life at Manhattan and how what he learned from it. So here we age through this process, and we're a little older here, like I think Gail is. My sister is 3 and I am 8. And then his world of speaking starts to take off. When he's speaking at Fordham, he's speaking at Princeton, on how he works with teams and creativity, how we need to make sure that things are safe, because he's realizing at times we're dealing with dangerous chemicals, but we have to work on and being creative. We just can't aim for a product. We have to aim for teamwork. We have to aim for sorting things out, being comfortable discussing the negative. And this led to my uncle forming this amazing graduate school and training program now, the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which his 2 sons are involved in it, specifically Chris. Now, this project was an interesting project, and it was in 1964, and the first Ranger satellites were supposed to send the first 6 pictures of the moon back to Earth. They all failed. Nothing worked. RCA was asked to try to, they had a change in contractors, try to help with the transmission of this electronic picture. It's never been done before. So Dad was assigned this as his team, and they did it. And this is public record picture, first moon picture ever taken. 5 years later, we landed on the moon. That was 2 years after he died. I'm sure he would have loved that, to see that experience. But what he said here is, I don't think I could have dealt with the productive teamwork in RCA had it not been for the Manhattan Oak Ridge experience. And everyone was supportive of him there, of his style of leadership. Is I just don't want to hear about the positives. I want to hear about your concerns about the negatives and how we're working on this project together so we can make it safe. Now, at the same time, as we're doing this, Dad, from about 62 to 68, is talking to me. This is a picture of he and I. I'm 17 then. He is 45. And he is talking to me because I am curious. And I'm asking him lots of questions. And he said, we need to read this. Hiroshima by John Hershey. And this is 6 human beings who survived the explosion of the atomic bomb over Hiroshima. And and we talked about it, and we would read it, and I started reading it with him at age 14, and every year we went back to it. This was not done in a morbid sense. It's like, I want to tell you my experience about how I'm processing this in me. And are you okay with that? And I never felt burdened. I didn't have a night of sleepless nights. It was joining. And it really set the stage for what he later saw as, hey, Greg, I'm telling you about these things. And this is a picture of Hiroshima. And this is public domain. I'm telling you about this because we need to process the negative to get through it. And we need to learn from it. So that we don't keep repeating what we did. And so 90,000 people in Hiroshima died on that day. And then some people estimate in 3 months, 4 months later, it was 160,000. There's quite a shelf life to radiation. It was very destructive. At the same time he's telling me this, it isn't about despair, but it's about how we can work on this and make and find hope in our lives. So he and I were very close, as I was with my mother, and my sister was 6 years younger, so she knew some of this story. One of the things my father was not afraid of was death. And he talked about death as an adventure, that we don't know what is going to happen. And we had dinner discussions on this. What did not prepare us was a stunning, shocking death of my father of a coronary thrombosis. The sun set too early at age 46 for him, and he died at work within 30 minutes of this event. There was no evidence that he had health problems. He had a physical on his desk that said that he was in very good health for someone at his age. I think he had, looking back on this, significant stress. So I was in college at the time, going close to finals on May 11. I had actually, and this is an interesting thing about family relationships, you have these intuitions. I did not know what was wrong. I had never skipped class in my life. I had bowling as a college class, and I skipped it to write a letter to my father at the time he was dying.
Mm.
Wow.
Missing him. And so 1 hour later, the dean of students calls me into his office. This is the first class I missed. I thought he was calling me because a bowling class being skipped. But I saw this on his desk, and it was right in front of me to read at the front of his desk. And he wasn't there.
Oh my.
And I just looked at this and I absorbed it, and I sat in the chair, stunned, and started crying. He came in shortly after that, comforted me, made arrangements, and we flew back to Lancaster. That was about 500 miles away. I was in Indianapolis, at Indianapolis University, as it's called now. So I became curious about this event. I wanted to know, what did anyone see stress in him? What was going on? And so I contacted and this is his memorial service. And I contacted his supervisor, who I actually knew his son. We grew up together, and Dad and he would interchange roles quite a bit at RCA. And I asked him to look in to if there's any evidence that we saw stress. And he then started interviewing people 18 years after his death and found someone that dad supervised. This employee, who was a chemist, walked into his office and said, Gil, you don't look healthy. This is 2 days before he died. I think you're worrying too much about us. You need to be taking some time for yourself. I know this physical is on your desk and you're proud of it. I am concerned. I think it would be better if you move back into a line position. This is all on a tape now that was given in a major presentation on my dad. And I think it's important to note the warning signs. When someone tells us things like this, we often easily dismiss it, but we also need to attend to it. Now, there wasn't much time here to attend, and he was working late that night, the night before he died, at Covenant Church. And he did his best to take care of himself. The medical tests were not available to detect cardiac problems. The irony is he started moving into medical isotopes soon after NY-12, soon after the war was over, that 20 in the 70s could have saved his life with detecting heart stress. So the big challenge in life is dealing with adversity and how we process it. And we need others to do that we trust, and we need to tell our stories. So one of the things that Dad did for me at a young age is he said, look, I'm just watching you. I have dyslexia. I do, and he did not. And he said, I know you're struggling in school, but you really have some gifts here. And I notice with your friends, you're just always involved in problem solving and facilitating. And would you be interested in shadowing a pastoral counselor at a hospital? You're only 17. Would you be interested in doing that? I said, absolutely. Now that was significant. And then watching him prepare for his Sunday school lessons, I got a style of how to teach. So I combine these two things. So this big challenge is dealing with a setback like an unexpected death, or in the situation with the big challenge in our lives with the Manhattan Project. For some people was the dropping of the bomb, and for the Japanese people, all the tremendous changes they had to go through as a result of this, and all the loss and all the pain and all the tragedy. And if you don't talk about the story, you really internalize it. But even if you do talk about it, you can internalize it because things are negative, but it can still give you hope and ways to navigate the negativity and find a transformation. So I'm going to move into what's happened with our family with this. So this is like a new beginning. You need to share what you've learned. This is an elixir in the journey. You do this to benefit the world now or someday. And these stories help keep us alive and help us learn from each other. So this is my sister, Gail, now, and her husband, Bruce. Gail had a career in social services. She is presently on the board of a homeless shelter. Bruce is a camp director and manager of a bike shop, and does a lot of his work in the service area and camping. Her children are both in business, honoring service, and balance, service and business together in fairness, as well as one of the children is also a library. Now, here is my direct family, and this is my daughter, Paige, and next to her is my stepdaughter and my wife. So I'm just going to briefly go over this. I told the story to both Paige and Jennifer and Jackie. And Paige is now she has a master's degree, and she is a director of patient services at an organization that helps patients afford, start, and stay on necessary medical treatment. She wrote an essay on my dad in high school. Very powerful essay, I felt. She shared her feelings, her memories about my father's work with her boyfriend that became her husband. Her husband, Ryan, just like my dad, right after college, he is a chemist. He then goes to Los Alamos. He gets he works in Los Alamos in a post-baccalaureate degree scientist program developing DNA testing that detects anthrax. But he is aware of this story of my dad before he even signs up. I mean, before he signs up to go. He then becomes a PhD in chemistry at Berkeley, developing new types of carbon nanomaterials. And today, Ryan is a data science manager working with teams at Twist Bioscience using AI to build 50,000 custom genes per month. Now, my stepdaughter, Jennifer, has a PhD, and she is an American Association for the Advancements of Science and Technology Policy Fellow, working with the Department of Energy and Bioenergy. She works with Oak Ridge and other people. So she is the third family member to work with Oak Ridge after my father. My other was my uncle, who did team building there. So Ryan and her. She helps manage bioenergy research, funding awards mainly on sustainable growth and harvest of biomass used for biofuels and bioproducts. And then Jackie is a former COBOL programmer, turning these details into developing preschools and doing curriculum for preschool science. This really got everybody going, I think, this combination. Now, going back to the 14th century, this is kintsugi. This is a Japanese philosophy that anything is broken that is in a bowl is sealed with gold. I particularly find this philosophy very helpful in therapy as well as in teaching. All of us are fragmented at different points in time, and we need to be sealed with our own gold. And that is often our stories and our own connections with other people where we feel safe and secure to tell our story. And then the peace bell that Ray wanted me to see, and thank you, Ray, for doing this, is very powerful. And this came in the 90s in Oak Ridge. If you visit Oak Ridge, do see this. I spent about an hour there just looking at it. It was so important to see. So the 3 C's of resilience are connection, compassion, and contribution. You just need to do one of these 3. You don't have to do all of them. They're about the body, your history, friends, nature, transpersonal beliefs, compassion, empathy, acceptance towards others and self, and contributions. So some people look at this list and say, do I have to do them all? No, just do one. Just do one. And that can help you deal with an adverse situation. So moving and finalizing this with the technology gap theory, this is like an epilogue. This is a theory I've adapted from two different theorists over 30 years apart, or 40 years, almost 50 years apart. And one is the culture lag theory of Ogburn in 48 and the mind over mood theory in 1997. And I put these things together because I was starting to see when people were coming into with problems that they were often complaining, I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I don't know what to do with my life and I have a lack of values, or my body is so tense I can't sleep at night, or I can't get things done and I'm very distracted. I started learning that since 2012, I better ask about the smartphone. And in technology, as William Ogburn says, it runs decades ahead of our awareness. And in technology, what happens here with the cell phone is a very interesting thing, is that many of the people coming in with problems surrounding inattention, problems completing tasks, depression, anxiety, you need to ask, how much are you using your screen time daily? And this really impacts things. So what we have is the average daytime in the US CDC rates of 6 hours for 8 to 10-year-olds, 9 hours for 11 to 14. This is including TV, 7.5 hours for 15 to 18-year-olds, and 6 hours and 37 minutes for 18 to 64-year-olds. They don't have data later than that. I think just looking at my uncle who's aging, this is a key variable in keeping him alive. So I'm not approaching this as a negative thing, but a positive and possibly negative thing. Now, with this in mind, this is our screen time, and we have to be careful that this is the way we're babysitting someone or caretaking someone, or just looking at this cell phone in the dark. As we know, there are many, it affects melatonin with no background light. This is an iPad, or you could do it on simply your cell phone. So this has become as important as a question to me, which I train therapists in now, as asking questions about addiction, abuse, adverse events. We need to know how this is affecting you. And now there's guidelines. And these are sources on the guidelines, American Academy of Pediatrics, Center of Disease Control. And I do recommend this book, just written, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness and What You Can Do About it. And it's all about management. So the children most at risk are ages 10 and 19. And the reason I'm going into this is just an extension of the Manhattan Project. And I really think that that technology is under-examined. It's under-examined by people that need to examine it, like therapists and me, and how we're using it. And this leads to health and mental health concerns. And then on this age group also, cyberbullying and screen addiction. So we need to problem solve it. And there's always a refusal or call to do this. And that refusal can lead, we need to gently problem solve how we can do this. How can we reduce this if it is 10 hours? If it is 7 hours and too much? What amount? When can we start? And do it gradually. So it's important to explore what's being used and how much, And it's important to accept a person because they may refuse the call to change. You usually refuse this call, as Joseph Campbell would say, 3 to 4 times before you accept it. Don't be scared if there's a refusal. And then examine if the person feels conflicted or ambivalent. That's a normal feeling. We need to hone in that. We can hold both things. And then what are you going to do? What simple, realistic, achievable tasks are you going to do? So we need to navigate this technological flooding and identify your own amount of daily use and what content categories of technology you're looking at. And it might be addictive. But this research on mental health aspects of screen time is not with children alone. It's with adults. It is a similar problem in adults. And you have to decide if your use is problematic and maybe interfering with your health, relationships, and work functioning. And you set simple, realistic, and achievable goals. And when you do that, you get hope. That's in control groups, by the way, and social science from C.R. Snyder. And review goals daily. And you need to monitor this. And when I work with therapists and their own use and clients with their own use, this, I would say, a third of the time is factored into the presenting problem that they come in with. So what this does is concludes my presentation, and it brings it together, and that technology runs ahead of ourselves. And what we look backwards in history, as Soren Kierkegaard says, but we need to move forward. And one of the most important things in changing mass consciousness, I think, is the Industrial Revolution, the Manhattan Project, screen time, and AI, changing the psyches. So thank you for this opportunity. We can learn to manage the technology gap by having transition meetings in our home, with ourselves, and in our teams. Anytime there's a new technology, I like to sit down and talk about it, even if it's an upgrade in a computer. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. Stop your share now, if you would.
Okay.
And let me ask you, a very good presentation. Thank you. You did exactly what I had hoped you would do, and you've tied it all together well. Can I ask you to talk a little about artificial intelligence and its impact as you see it, not only how fast it's moving, but what is it doing to us mentally?
Well, I think, first of all, there's ethics groups inside every association evaluating this, as well as laws trying to be formulated on how to regulate it. And it is an opportunity for advancement, and it is like Ryan is doing that in his work, and it can really be helpful. But we also need to be aware of the shadow side of it, where it's replacing us.
Hmm.
And I was just doing a major hearing from someone yesterday saying our plagiarism rate has increased in community colleges, and I'm supervising this individual, by 60% this year because of AI.
Wow.
And so we're becoming dependent, and it's also creating fearfulness, but it is also generating hope. It is a positive and negative force, but we're going to have to be on this with transition technology gap meetings all the time, because it's a fast growing field.
I think one of the things, and I talk about AI quite a bit in my classroom, even in high school. And I think the problem with AI, especially with those that are immature, those that have not lived long enough to, have a sense of who they are, people that just want to get something done. I think what it's doing is it's replacing thinking, or it has the possibility to replace a person's thinking things through. They're just checking the list, checking the box. I've caught several of my students using AI, Chat GPT to write their papers. It's interesting. In our school, we have a technology where I can see they use Chromebooks in class, and I can see on my screen what they are doing. Okay, I can see each Chromebook on my screen as a teacher in the classroom to make sure that they're where they need to be and staying on task. And I had one student they were writing a paper, and I could see the prompt that she was on Chat GPT. And this student said, write a paper about a 300-word essay on blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then the next prompt was make it look like a freshman in high school wrote it. Okay.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So what it's doing is it's allowing them to avoid thinking and clear, rationale and the things that you need to do to be able to learn and to grow as an individual. I think, to me, that's the greatest fear, because I think AI is here. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yes.
But like you said, it's a matter of how we can manage AI to be beneficial to our society and to
yes.
that to me is the challenge.
Thank you for that. Here's my reaction. I totally agree with you. And from a therapy perspective, when you have someone overtake your functioning, you lose your identity. And that's what AI could potentially do, because we lose confidence in our own will and effort and efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why we need to move into AI education, mental health education inside the schools,
mm-hmm.
so that we can foster our own strengths, use AI to help and support us,
mm-hmm.
but not become dependent on.
Yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful description, Keith.
One of the things, and you try to think of ways to combat that. Okay, because that's for me is, even though I teach audio and video production, I'm there. I don't have to be teaching high school. Okay, let's just say that. I am there to have an impact and to make a difference and to help these young people find their path in life. And for me, I tell them, I say, if you can learn to think, if you can learn to write, and if you can learn to speak, those are the three most important things that you can learn to do in high school. Speak effectively, write effectively, and be a critical thinker. Okay? You'll be way above everybody else if you can learn how to do that. So one of the things that I'm thinking is I'm going to go back to pencil and paper for writing essays. We're not going to do them on the computer anymore. And that's going to force them to think, to formulate they won't like it.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And out here in Oregon, where I am, many professors are starting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the early entrance, year 1 and year 2, because it creates a sense of self-efficacy if you can do that, and because you can get over reliant on someone doing it for you.
Yeah.
And it just interferes like with the ability for someone, a toddler, to walk if they aren't encouraged to walk
Yeah.
and just use aids.
Well, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. But that was rough.
Well, it's been a good discussion. It has been really well I think for Keith, for you to be able to chime in and be a part of this discussion, because you have some real world experience there that we're dealing with. And Greg, you're obviously involved in much greater detail of how the cell phone or iPhones are impacting us, Keith and me, not just the young children.
No.
But thank you for that, and really do appreciate you being here. Keith, we have the next opportunity that I will talk about, and we will have with us Carter Heydrich, and we will have his book, if I can hold it up where you can see it.
Hold it closer to you.
There you go. There you go. Critical Mass will be the book that we'll be talking about. He's a good friend. I also had him come to Oak Ridge for a tour several years ago now. But that'll be the next opportunity I have to be with you. But I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks.
When will that be? The end of July?
It'll be the 1st of August, I believe, early in August. And I'm leaving July up to you.
All right. I'll see. I've been working on I may even do a little presentation. Something that I've been working on.
That'd be great. Good deal. I think it'd be good.
But anyway, if not, we'll see you folks in a little over a month.
No, you'll do something. I know.
Greg, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Greg, for being with us again.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care, everyone. My pleasure. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Greg.
All right, folks. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay. Bye.